Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this week's More video. Glad that you are taking time to get more out of this week's message and go a little bit deeper into what we talked about Sunday. We've been going through the book of Acts for a few weeks now and are really focusing in on those first 11 chapters, looking at the growth of the early church and how they kept moving forward. No matter what they faced, the church kept moving forward. And so this week we were in Acts chapter 5 and we saw Peter and the rest of the apostles again on trial in front of the Sanhedrin for performing miracles and proclaiming in Jesus a resurrection from the dead. Now again, this is the second time that we've read this happening in our series and in the book of Acts. And so as they're put on trial now, the question is, okay, we let them go last time, they just kept doing it. Peter just told us, if you were there Sunday, that he's going to do it again. So what do we do now to keep this from happening? So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up where we left off this past Sunday. If you haven't seen Sunday's message yet, go ahead, hit pause, go to the podcast, go to the live stream, catch up, because what we're going to read now is a direct follow-up to where we were at on Sunday. We're going to start in Acts chapter 5, verse 33. So this is right after Peter tells the Sanhedrin, we're going to obey God, not people. Verse 33 says, when they heard this, the Sanhedrin, they were enraged and wanted to kill them. But a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, who was respected by all the people, stood up in the Sanhedrin and ordered the men to be taken outside for a little while. And he said to them, men of Israel, be careful about what you're about to do to these men. Some time ago, Theudas rose up claiming to be somebody, and a group of about 400 men rallied to him. He was killed, and all of his followers were dispersed and came to nothing. After this man, Judas the Galilean rose up in the days of the census and attracted a following. He also perished, and all his followers were scattered. So in the present case, I tell you, stay away from these men and leave them alone. For if this plan or this work is of human origin, it will fail. But if it is of God, He will not be able to overthrow them. You may even be found fighting against God. And they were persuaded by him. After they called in the apostles, they had them flogged. They ordered them not to speak in the name of Jesus and released them. Then they went out from the presence of the Sanhedrin, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to be treated shamefully on behalf of the name. Every day in the temple and in various homes, they continued teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Messiah. This is a pretty interesting turn of events here. After Peter gives his defense and says, hey, look, we're going to obey God, not men. And that's what we talked about Sunday, right? That the Spirit gives us power to obey Jesus. Then the Sanhedrin, the court, ruled primarily by the Sadducees, get infuriated. They want to go ahead and put them to death then and there, but not a Sadducee, a Pharisee. Remember, those are two different religious groups, who is on the Sanhedrin, named Gamaliel, stands up and says, hey, time out. And so they send Peter and the apostles outside, and Gamaliel presents his case, which is in essence this. Look, guys, this is not the first time that we have seen a so-called Messiah rise up, and then he dies, and then his followers are disbanded. He says, if this is from God, nothing we do is going to stop it anyway, but since it's not from God, let's just let it die out on its own. So again, this is kind of an interesting turn of events here, especially Gamaliel, right? Because we said that Gamaliel is not a Sadducee, he's a Pharisee. And the Sadducees were the ones who were the religious left of the day. They didn't believe in the supernatural, no resurrections, no miracles, no angels. And the Pharisees were the religious right of the day. They were a lot more traditional, they were a lot more legalistic, but they did believe in the supernatural, such as the resurrection from the dead coming in the future. They did believe in angels. They did believe in miracles. So because Gamaliel's a Pharisee, maybe he was a little more inclined to believe what the disciples were teaching. Another thing really interesting about Gamaliel is we know from reading later on that he was Paul's tutor. Paul the apostle was at one time, when he was Saul, he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, and he was trained by Gamaliel. So this is Paul's teacher. And what he says is true. It's true today. Like, because this church was a move of God, not just a political movement, it was not going to be stopped, no matter what the Sanhedrin did, no matter what the Roman Empire did, because this move was empowered by the Spirit. This church was empowered by the Spirit. It was unstoppable. So he was dead on. Other so-called messiahs came, died, and the group disbanded. The difference was Jesus came, died, came back to life, the Spirit came down, and the church continued to move forward. However, even though what he said was true, it's probably true that his motives in saying it were more political than anything else. He remember, is a Pharisee. And he is probably one of the Pharisees who was constantly a thorn in the side of Jesus, confronting and trying to trap him. Matter of fact, he groups Jesus in his defense to the Sanhedrin. He groups Jesus in with these other false messiahs, showing that he believed Jesus was also a false messiah. And while the point that he makes about the church is right, because God was with them, they were unstoppable, it's probably important for us to note here that his argument doesn't hold true in every sense. And here's what I mean by that. Success is not always a test of truth. Just because something works, just because something lasts, does not mean it's true. For instance, there are false religions, there are cults that have grown at a pace quicker than the church, and they're still around today, doesn't mean they're true. So while the success of the early church, given by supernatural power and supernatural boldness, is a testament to its truthfulness, success in and of itself cannot be the final line for truth. Another thing that we see here with Gamaliel is, you go back and look and it said he was somebody who was respected by all the people, but I think what he's trying to do here in this statement is he's trying to play the middle ground. He's trying not to take sides, right? So hey, let's let these guys off with a warning and let's just see what happens. But here's another one of Gamaliel's faults, guys. There is no neutral with God. You can't play it neutral. You can't sit on the sideline. You can't say, hey, let's wait and see. There is no neutral with God. So if you're on the sidelines today and you're just trying to wait and see how this thing plays out, look, you've got to make a decision about who Jesus is. If Jesus is the Messiah, if He really died and is raised to new life now today, alive with the Father, then you cannot remain neutral. Here's what I want you to see, though. I want you to see the contrast of Gamaliel trying to keep the people. Remember, the people at this point love the apostles. They're popular. They're performing miracles and signs. The people love them. Remember, we talked about Sunday that the officers, the police, arrested them without violence because they were afraid of the people. So while Gamaliel was trying to keep the middle ground and not really have to face persecution from the people because of what they did to the apostles, I want you to look at the apostles' response when they were done. Go back to verse 41. After they were released, it says, they went out from the presence of the Sanhedrin, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to be treated shamefully on behalf of the name. Look at the apostles. They were not afraid to take a stand. They were not afraid to be sold out for Jesus. They were not afraid to put all their eggs in this basket, and in so doing, they were worshiping and praising and thanking God that they were counted worthy to suffer for the name of Jesus. Gamaliel tried to run the middle road where he wouldn't face opposition or persecution from either side, but the apostles knew what side they were on and said, if we have to suffer for being on this side, if we have to suffer for being on Jesus' side, if we have to suffer for being obedient to Jesus, then we're going to thank Jesus that He counted us worthy to suffer in His name. That's kind of an incredible thought. We're going to get more into that next week. So we're going to leave some questions for you to think through, to talk through, but I want you to be here next Sunday as we dig deeper into what it is to suffer for Jesus and how Jesus can use that to keep moving the church forward.